Welcome everybody. My name is Christa. The internet knows me as Practical Astros. And I have a brother from another mother, Gary, is joining me. And we're going to talk about Aries and kind of Aries through the decans. But I'll let Gary introduce himself. And I've got questions for you, but you can just dive on in.
Right on. Thank you, Krista. It's great to be here with you. Yeah, we're brothers and sisters through an old brother of mine, Kelly Lee Phipps. It's like he was my best man for a long time there in Asheville. And so I've got some stuff from his archives that I want to share with folks because I mean he was working on a book. I swear I really expected it to be like game changing. It was so he was integrating the 5 element Chinese system into tropical Western astrology, and he called it the Tao of astrology. So I want to share with that, and yeah, with the decans, I call them the deacons because it sounds like, it's like I come from the South, so I was raised
Yeah.
Southern Baptist. So deacons, they're
Yeah.
they're like holy and stuff.
It's funny. I never thought about my dad. I grew up in a Presbyterian church, but my
Yeah,
dad was the head deacon. I never even thought about that before.
right. The deacons. And I think you're part of the astrologers co-op thing that's going
Yep.
on too, right? And so, yeah, I was reading Marlena's intro to that where she was
Yeah.
talking about, um, I think it's really important for people to understand where and how to situate the decans in terms of like, because something I feel like something very unfortunate happened in the medieval era where the various essential dignities were ranked.
Yeah.
Dude, they did not do that in Hellenistic era astrology at all. And in Hermetic, which really to some degree predates the Hellenistic, like the technical Hermetica, which are astrological, they came earlier than like the 2nd century BC, some of
Hmm.
them. And so, you have like these things where it's talking about, oh, the 27th decan from horoscopos represents the career. Well, of course it does, because that would be the middle decan of the 10th whole sign house,
Hmm.
you see, and stuff like this. So, but anyways, um, in that cosmology, in the Hermetic cosmology, the decans are in a sphere above the sphere of the zodiac.
Huh.
So they're kind of like the fixed stars were seen as like this higher realm beyond the planetary beings, almost in like a Gnostic sense, but not nearly that hardcore. Like the Gnostics are like the planets are actually our jailers, right?
Right.
I'm not down with that. I
Yeah.
think, but I think they're kind of intermediaries in a way, like, like more like Kabbalah, like there's this ladder, stairway to heaven, if you want,
Yeah.
or ladder tree, whatever. But the fact that the decans are in a sphere above that is like they're independent in a way, and
Hmm.
they have a higher overview. So like, did you ever see The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe? Like just to bring it down to like almost like a new agey kind of thing,
Yeah. I read those
right?
like obsessively as
Okay, so
kids. Yeah.
remember how like one of the kids is like a traitor, he's like the Judas,
Mm-hmm.
and the witch gets a hold of that. She's like trying to use it against them. And Aslan's like, okay, yeah, technically, in terms of like, the modern magic or whatever it was called, he's like, you're right, you have these rights, but I'm invoking the deep magic.
Hmm.
And so because he was willing to sacrifice himself for that boy, I think it was Edward, was his
Yeah.
yeah,
The
and
Turkish delight kid.
yeah, exactly. Because Aslan was willing to sacrifice himself, and Aslan is very obviously a Christ figure.
Right. Right.
Um, because Aslan was willing to make that sacrifice, that was a deeper magic than the magic she was trying to use.
Hmm.
And so that's the way I think of the decans, as you can call it higher or deeper, whatever. It's transcendent to the zodiac, actually, in
Hmm.
the Hermetic cosmology. And so this idea that like, oh, you can just dismiss. I mean, I hear these practitioners talking about, well, bounds dignity isn't even dignity and face dignity isn't even dignity. Dude, it's the opposite of that.
Yeah.
This is
Well,
like,
putting it into a hierarchy, and maybe that's they're putting it into a hierarchy because they have preference, but that doesn't
yeah,
necessarily
of
mean that
course, it's
it's,
okay if you want to
yeah,
have preference, but to like dogmatize that and
right.
yeah,
Right.
no, I don't think
Yeah.
so. Because for
Well, and
me,
my relationship with the DECANS has always been through tarot. It was never like I'm applying it from a tarot, kind of a divinatory imagery, invoking like the storytelling over the
oh my God,
technicality
if you
of it.
look at the Rider-Waite Smith, to give Pamela Coleman Smith her due there,
Yeah.
look at that imagery. It's so clear. Like the Two of Wands, there's this dude standing there with the world in his hand. He's like got the world in the palm of his hands. But they see this is so, and this decan is ruled by Mars, right? Because the last decan and the first decan in the
Mm-hmm.
Chaldean system are ruled by Mars. And
Yeah.
not Arthur Edward Waite, McGregor Mathers, book T of the Golden Dawn, he
Mm-hmm.
says the reason for that is like it requires a double dose of Mars energy to overcome the coldness of winter,
Mm-hmm.
right? So but in this case, I see the dry nature of Mars because there's two. There's a choice. The dry
Mm-hmm.
is separative, right? And so I have the world in the palm of my hands, but what am I going to do with that power? You
I'm
know?
gonna share my screen because I did pull up all three of them together. Let's see
Right
if this
on. Yeah,
works.
I did too. I made a little graphic.
Yeah, I
Right
did
on. There you
this
go. Sweet. Excellent.
just to have like some sort of visual because it's to me it's a visual, and
Absolutely.
I
No.
really like the Two of Wands, and it's funny looking at other just depictions of it, kind of invokes kind of the um the power of the Two of Wands. This one, like in a way, it's a little deceptive of like he's calmly looking, but it's like such a strategy card to
Oh
me.
yeah.
I mean,
But
it's
and that's why I say it's very dry. It's like he
mm,
has to make a decision. What am I going to do with this power that I've been given? I mean,
yeah,
look, this is a very clearly privileged person. They're standing on a castle.
mm-hmm,
We're looking, like socially privileged, and so that's one of the things, just a brief diversion. One of the things that I love about Austin Coppock's book on the Deacons,
mm-hmm.
36 Faces, which if I had known it was going to be like so valuable,
All
I
of
would have
us.
bought like five extra copies, right? Because it's like what? It's like $500 on whatever. But um he calls the image for this decan the axe.
Ah,
So, and for me, that's so much more appropriate because being born poor and not being born, rich like this dude, like needing to chop a clearing in the primeval forest
mm,
before you can even get to where this guy is. You just need like a space to build a log cabin or whatever,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Like Abraham Lincoln. It's such an American like frontier, like that was the first time, honestly, like I've been an Aries my whole life, and I feel like it's pretty misunderstood because everybody's all like, "Oh, it's the warrior." It's like it's so much more than that, and we're going to talk
yeah,
about some of the things that Kelly said about that because he really got the multivalent nature of it. But for this guy, this sequence to me is just a really clear story, and I'll just show you what I see briefly. So
sure.
there's this guy, he has the power of the world in his hands, but he has to make a choice. So there's this dryness of Mars, the
Mm,
separate, like I can't have that and this. I got to choose one and focus all of this power on that choice, right? That's Mars,
yeah,
right? The circle of spirit directed out to a single point, a single
yeah,
choice.
yeah,
Okay. And then in the middle we have right, this choice is now enacted in the power of three, where there's three boats taking off. So he's sent a fleet of boats away as on a trading mission or a diplomatic mission or whatever mission. So he's made his choice and now he's enacted that, right? So they
mm-hmm,
call in the Golden Dawn, they call the first one the Lord of Dominion. So I
right,
have this dominion, I have this power. The second one is the Lord of established strength. right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I've established my choice. I'm making my play, right? I'm gonna put my chips in the pile of the game of life, right?
Yeah.
And then in the third decan, the Lord of perfected success. I mean, it's pretty simple from the old school perspective. The guy is a young guy. He's got to establish himself. He establishes himself, and then what? He gets married, right?
Yeah.
Because that's the way it worked back then. You had to prove yourself before you could earn, a spouse.
Yeah.
And, and one of the things about the third decan that's interesting to me is Marcus Manilius, Astronomica.
Mm-hmm.
He put the joy of Venus in the 10th house.
Oh, wow.
The only one that did that. And a lot of people are like condemn him for that and like say, oh, he's an outlier. Like everybody else was saying this, so they're all right and he's wrong. It's like, no, dude, like think about it. Like getting married marrying well, marrying up, or just
Mm.
marrying in a way that marrying out, whatever you want to call it, like that was one of the biggest power moves that a person could make to
Established legacy. I mean, which is what,
absolutely,
yeah,
you know what I'm
yeah.
saying? And so it makes a perfect sequence of like there's this raw power in the first decan, and what am I going to do with it? And then there's this seizing and learning to control that power in the second decan, and then there's this union with another powerful individual to broaden that,
Mm-hmm.
the third decan. That's what
Yeah.
I see.
Yeah. Yeah. I like just even the position of the sticks, of the
Hmm.
wands, and the first one, it's like he's having to kind of assert himself a little bit more in the second, in the two of wands, like he's really holding on, and he's he's making that choice. He's made that choice with his hand on there. But then the
Right,
middle
he's like,
one,
yeah,
the third, the three of wands, they're kind of like somewhat planted on their own. Like he's planting that, he is establishing that. And then the fourth one, like no one's having to hold it up.
yeah, it's
Like
just
they're
there.
on, they are like that balance, that the empress and the emperor, like flanking those two cards, really do, like that becomes the establish,
Yeah,
of whatever project that, it's funny, the three of wands is the only card I've ever reenacted. I
yeah.
took T. Susan Chang's course, and one of the kind of the homework assignments was to choose a card and just recreate it. And so
Wow.
I blindly pulled. I didn't want to choose one because I knew, I was like, oh, I'll do the high priestess. That'll be easy. That'll be fun. And this one came out, and I was like, well, shit. Okay, now I gotta be the three of wands.
Wow.
And so I recreated it and took a picture. I'll send you the picture.
Nice.
And I don't have Aries placements in my nativity, but I do feel like Aries have Gemini and Scorpio. When you go look at shaming the signs, it seems like Gemini and Scorpio get shamed, but Aries gets sidelined to be like a singular type of character.
That's what I'm saying, man.
Yeah.
People try to make it like this sort of unique, one-dimensional, and it's
Mm-hmm.
not, man. It's
Yeah.
it's so multidimensional. Yeah.
Yeah, I
That's
think Rick Levine talked about the dandelion seed coming out. When a dandelion, or no, maybe it was calendula. So the calendula seeds look like horns.
mm,
The way that they're curved, and when they come out, they just come out, and they have those two leaves, those early leaves, and it looks like the Aries horn, but it reminds me of the two of wands, and that there is that choice. It's like that springing forth, and it's like,
yeah.
the essence, or the ace of wands becomes two, and that's
Right.
the beginning of the whole story.
Right.
It kind of carries the nuance of the fool's journey.
Yeah. And for those people that don't know the background of in the Golden Dawn system, um, each decan is associated with a planet. I think we talked about the Chaldean rulerships. And
Yeah.
so how that works is that it's a descending order from Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, Sun, Venus, Mercury, Moon. It's an
Mm-hmm.
order of speed,
Yeah.
an order of right, and so it starts with Mars, as I said, because like the impulse of overcoming and so what you have here is the Mars decan of a Mars ruled sign. So there's like a double dose of Mars, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you have the sun decan of a sun ruled sign, the exaltation of, and so there's like a double sun.
Yeah.
Notice that the sea is golden, right?
Mm-hmm.
Ever notice that?
I hadn't.
Yeah.
And
And
do you follow the exaltation degrees too?
sure. Yeah. I mean,
Yes.
nobody knows where the hell they come from or how to
Right.
justify it, but it's there.
Yeah. So the 19th degree would fall in the sun's
Absolutely.
card too. Yeah.
Yeah, in that decan, right? And then the fourth decan, or sorry, the third decan, the four of wands is ruled by Venus, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you can kind of see that, that and like I said in book T, they call it the Lord of Dominion, Lord of Established Strength, and Lord of Perfected Success.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, there's a kind of a progression here. Um, my son is in the third decan.
Mm.
So my sun and my moon are in Venus ruled decans. And so, I was a Venus guy for a long time. Still am, but I kind of branched out with Mercury and different stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel that influence of Venus over my sun like really strong. I mean, that
Mm.
was my dream that I had. I saw Venus
Yeah.
in
Can
my
you I
sun.
read a little bit about it and you told me a little bit, but can you tell that story?
Yeah, briefly. I mean, I had been given a deck of tarot cards at a so I left so I was a really gifted student, but I was poor and I didn't have that much money, so I ended up at the wrong school. I ended up at an engineering school because it's like the limited scholarships that I got, that's I had to go to a state school
Mm-hmm.
instead of like an art school like UVA. I went to Virginia Tech, and I just struggled, and I was like, I hate this. Like, what am I doing here?
Mm.
And so I left to see the world, man, and I hitchhiked across the country. I'm at a rainbow gathering, and some dude just hands me a tarot deck. And I started messing with it, and I was like, holy shit, like I think I kind of get this.
Yeah.
um and then, long story short, like after a while of, I feel like it opened my consciousness up, right? And then this dream came in. Well, a series of really archetypal dreams. Like one dream, I saw this burning cross where there's like this white fire, and it wasn't like a KKK burning cross.
Right.
It was like on fire with white light,
Yeah.
and there was a symbol of like a lemniscate, and the light from the lemniscate was going from the cross into a well. And I
Hmm.
was like, man, I don't know what the hell that means, but it's clearly like deeply symbolic and
Yeah.
stuff. And so I had like these series of dreams, and this was the final one where I was just laying on my back in a field of green grass, which I love to do because I'm like a Taurus Mars. Laying in a field of green grass is like my jam.
Yeah.
And I realized like I can actually look right at the sun. It doesn't hurt my eyes. And I'm looking and I'm like, holy shit. There's like the symbol for Venus is just like blazoned inside the solar disk. And I just knew like that, I guess instinctively, and I didn't really put this full thought together until later, but like I didn't feel like I could trust academia. There was something about it, like it was all this contrived, man-made, human-made, woman-made, man-made, stuff that was like, yeah, I don't want to like dedicate the rest of my life to something that's just like a bunch of people's
Decisions about
to
what's
make me
real.
jump through a
Yeah.
series of hoops and whatever. Like I can't. I'm sorry, I can't. But this, it felt like it came from someplace higher, someplace
Mm-hmm.
more that I could trust. And I was like, okay, to me, it was like I had my marching orders, and I was like, I'm gonna figure out what this dream means. And
Mm.
so and so I ended up with the one of the old Rosicrucian ephemeris
Yeah.
from like a used bookstore, and I was like, okay, maybe it's literal. And I learned to read the ephemeris, and I found out, yeah, there was an inferior conjunction of the Sun and Venus when I had that dream.
That's amazing.
And I was like, okay, dude, and so I spent like years with a candle. I was living in a house with no electricity because I was fixing up the house for this lady. So at night I was with a candle, like flipping through the ephemeris, trying to figure this out.
So did you
Um,
learn through an ephemeris? Like, were you looking just at like patterns through an ephemeris? Wow.
yeah. And I learned to draw a chart by hand, and then, and then I started learning to delineate, and I learned to delineate like by just watching my own transits
Mm-hmm.
and seeing what happened that day.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, this means that, right? Like life was my astrology teacher.
Yeah.
You know.
At what point did you meet other people that were doing that? Like,
Yeah, like
when did you have your own
I
like
met
second of wands
one of the
decision?
cats at Hindsight that was kind of big in the background. His name was Alan White. I met Alan before I ended up at Hindsight, and before Alan was at Hindsight, actually. I met Alan in Winchester. There was in Winchester, Virginia, there was
Mm-hmm.
like this New Age church or whatever. And so, Alan kind of he was like, you probably don't even know the difference between the different kinds of squares. And I was like, okay, you got me. What are you talking about? And so he kind of challenged me, and that's the worst thing you can do for an Aries, because I was like, all right, I'll answer that challenge. And so that's when I got kind of really serious about it, because I had just been like exploring,
Yeah.
and then he was clearly at another level, and I was like, okay, like I'm ready to take it to another level and stuff. But yeah, that just felt like to me, something that I not only could trust and answer, but that I had to,
Mm.
and so but yeah, the being a Venus ruled decan, I don't find that to be a minor dignity at all. I find it to be like major. And like, if you look at just like, for instance, Martin Luther King Jr., right? Clearly a solar figure. Man's one
Right.
of the greatest leaders of the 20th century.
Yeah.
Well, the only dignity his son has is accidental dignity if you take the noon time, but it's in the third decan of Capricorn, which is ruled by the sun,
Mm.
and one of the greatest orators of all time,
Mm-hmm.
right? Mercury in the second decan of Aquarius.
Yeah.
Okay. Like, I have a dream of what? Of brother and sisterhood of
Right.
humanity. Like, dude,
Right.
you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
so these are not minor dignities at all, I don't think. Um, they're very powerful. And like you said, the imagery of the cards, whether you go, I've been working with the AI image generators,
Mm-hmm.
and I've been like taking the descriptions from Book T, which are different than this. This is actually, even though Alfred Edward Waite was associated with the Golden Dawn, like he kind of took them in a little bit different direction in some instances. The descriptions in Book T that Mathers gives are much simpler in some cases. But I've been taking those descriptions, and then like I'll take like the Thoth card and
Mm-hmm.
the Hermetic. With the Hermetic is like Dowson, and he's more true to the Book T. So I'll take those two cards, show the AI bot those two cards, give it the description, and then see what it generates. And it's
Mm.
like, it's incredible, man.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's
Well,
like,
and just like thinking about all the dignities. I mean, there's arguments of which one you would give preference to, like there's the argument of, well, exaltations are bigger, more important than
dude,
domicile. And it's
who's the
like,
emperor? Who's the emperor? Aries is the emperor. The
yeah,
emperor is king of kings.
yeah.
Okay, so I'm sorry, but that's above Leo, yo. The strength card is the strength card. This is the freaking emperor. I'm sorry. Like,
Yeah.
I'm just, yeah, I told you I wasn't going to slander any signs, but I just had to slander Leo for a little bit.
No, I mean, it's like it's important to think about, like, there's I feel like I inherently distrust any sort of prescription of how things are supposed to be studied,
Or have to be, right?
or
Yeah.
especially in
Dogma.
kind of the dogma,
Yeah.
and so
Dogma is useful until it's not. Dogma
right,
is useful until it becomes a freaking prison, dude.
right, it can be a scaffold for you to like
Right.
hang something on, hang some sort of
But when
understanding,
it
but then
becomes a
as you
prison,
understand it,
and especially when you
exactly,
start trying to imprison other people in your dogma,
yeah,
no, dude, I'm
yeah.
out. I'm out at that
Well,
point.
and I feel like it's, if you stay curious with anything, regardless of whatever the study is, then you're going to just glean more from it instead of deciding to be trapped by your own previously held thoughts. And
Yeah.
so, I think that domicile, makes sense to be introduced to astrology. It's like, okay, well, Venus and Taurus, Venus and Libra, like that makes
So
sense.
obvious, right?
It's
Yeah.
an easy thing to like hang some ideas of, and then
Yeah.
you can look at, okay, well, let's look at like Libra and Saturn. Let's look at Pisces, Venus. Like let's look at those things and expand out.
Because to achieve true balance, dude, you got to make hard ass choices. That's Saturn's exaltation. You got to make
Yeah.
really hard, difficult decisions to achieve true balance.
Well, and
It ain't
also
easy.
like just the nature of Saturn to endure. It's like you have to be able to endure all harvest or all season to glean a harvest. And like the beginning of, Libra is that beginning of being able to harvest it. It's
Yep.
like Libra's work too.
Totally,
So
man.
I
Yeah.
just feel like it's like if you can think about all of the dignities as a way of just entry points into some sort of exploration, not even understanding, because like you might understand it until you explore more and then you're confused again. Like that's the whole point. You're
Yeah.
not supposed to ever be settled on it. You're just supposed to like ride it for a while because it has some sort of alignment. But as soon as you settle, you stop that flow of curiosity, and then that's when imprisonment, or like you're setting up a concrete boundary just around yourself and around your own mind.
And
And
it
then when you try to
stagnates.
impose that on other people, the imposing it
What a waste
feels.
of energy. Like, I can't understand, like, we have this gift. It's a gift, it's a godlike gift of creativity, right? We
Mm-hmm.
were made in the image of a God that is creative AF, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So, so like, why would you waste that ability to create on trapping people and things in your own self in a stagnant, closed system? I
Mm-hmm.
can't understand it, man. It just boggles my
there
mind.
there's that astrologer, Aligning Lights, and she did a YouTube live last night, and one of the comments she made was, it really struck me because she was like, people think that if you're like serious about something, that if you're kind of a little bit, maybe a little more jaded, people almost respect the jaded opinions more as if they're more informed.
Mm,
But it's not, to be hopeful doesn't mean that you're not wise. To be
right.
curious doesn't mean that you're not intelligent.
I think it
It's,
takes more wisdom to be hopeful than it does to be jaded, man. I
yeah,
mean, if you
yeah.
read Marcus Aurelius, who was considered one of the greatest Roman emperors and like probably the embodiment of Plato's philosopher king, yes, he's a stoic, but like he literally says like if you choose not to be hurt by something, then you're not hurt by it.
Hmm.
know, there's a really powerful medicine in that because I've used that in interactions with people where like, sometimes people leave you guessing and you don't know what is going on and you have to sort of figure it out because you don't have that direct line to them or whatever. And I realized like there's been times where if I had made a choice to, instead of making a choice to be hurt by their lack of, or my perception of what their
Hmm.
lack of whatever meant, if I had just chosen to not be hurt by that, then things might have turned out really freaking different.
Hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so I see that kind of wisdom of like, um, that's a hopeful wisdom because it's not, I mean, it would be easy to say, oh, that's like Pollyanna or spiritual bypassing just because you choose not to be hurt, like, ugh. But it's also really powerful. Like you're making that choice of that two of wands. Like
Yeah.
I'm choosing to interpret this. I'm choosing to trust the higher, um, the better self of this other person. Like I'm choosing to
Right.
interpret in lieu of more definitive, I'm choosing the higher vibe, man,
Yeah.
and like that's a very hopeful, and it takes wisdom to do that because it's so easy to just fall into negativity and say, well, they didn't do this, so it means they don't care, or they, and like blah blah blah, or it means they're this or that. And I don't know. I think it's lazy actually. I think it takes a much stronger will to stay hopeful and stay trusting and stay
Mm-hmm.
open, you
Well,
know?
did you ever read Neil Gaiman's Sandman or
No.
see the series? It's on Netflix, but there's this
Mm-mm.
moment where so Sandman gets trapped for like 100 years by this kind of Aleister Crowley-esque occult
Oh,
Englishman,
wow.
and so
Sounds
he
like
so
Merlin getting trapped in that,
and
right?
so like he's trapped, and so the dream world, the dream time gets he is directionless, and all the nightmares and dreams just slowly leave because they don't have their lord there. And so
Wow.
when he finally is broken free, he has to go back and reclaim his relics that give him his power. And one of the relics is his helm, which is like this helmet that he wears. And one of the demons of hell has bargained a human for it, and now it has the helm down in hell. And so um, the Sandman has to travel to hell and deal with Lucifer Morningstar,
Wow.
and challenges Lucifer Morningstar to get his helm back so he can reclaim his power. Right? He needs these sigils, and
Mm.
so they battle in story. So they, like, Sandman says, I am a windstorm that that rips your clothes, and Lucifer's like, I am blah blah blah, and they go back and forth until they're like
Kind of like the
battling through
devil went
these.
down to Georgia. Charlie
Yeah.
Daniels gets in a fiddling contest with the devil, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's similar. It's like they're
Wow.
battling with ideas is what
That's
they're
funny.
battling. And at the
Yeah.
very end, Sandman is like nearly dead. Everything is taken away, and he's laying there on the ground. It's all black, and he opens his eyes and he says, I am hope. And that was the final thing that destroyed the battle. It's like and like when you think of
It
like
banishes the evil, man, you
and
know? Yeah.
Sagittarius going into Capricorn, it's like the darkest, like the brightest light shines in the darkest of places. And
Yeah.
Sagittarius, being such a hopeful, quintessentially hopeful sign, is
Yeah, and the
that
sun. I
darkest
mean,
point.
how can you see a sunrise and not feel hopeful, man? I defy
Yeah.
you to go out and really see a sunrise and be depressed. Like you
Yeah.
can't do it, man.
Yeah.
Like I feel like there's times where I've witnessed the sunrise and I swear I honestly have to ask myself like how different how is this any different than like the first sunrise where like the sun god Atum rose from the Nile, like this
Mm,
is it, this it's the same thing. And
yeah.
it feels incredible to like realize like every day the world is born anew, and every day you get another chance to make
Mm-hmm.
this choice of the two of wands, like
Yeah.
what am I going to do with this life that I've been given?
Yeah.
It's so powerful, man, and it's so beautiful, you know? Yeah, that's really cool story. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah. That
I'm
whole
all,
series
I'm all
is,
fired up
well,
now.
the whole series is worth to read, but that's one of the things that
But yeah,
I
Viktor
think of as like,
Frankl, I mean, Viktor Frankl, like existential psychology, this guy was like trapped in a Nazi death camp, right?
mm,
And he chose to be hopeful even after being persecuted and trapped in a Nazi death camp. You know what I'm
mm-hmm.
saying? And so
Yeah.
if he can do it, then surely I can.
Well, and just like that two of wands, I mean, thinking about what's, so the light is starting to increase, at
Yeah.
Imbolc, basically, at the solstice. It's like it's incremental, but like
This
I
is the
like
threshold where
this
it's
is the
like,
victory. It's like the
yes,
victory of light.
absolutely. That's
Um,
exactly what it is, Krista. Really good
yeah.
point. Yeah.
Um,
It is the triumph of light over the dark, and there's no going back, right? And Aries
yeah,
knows that. They
yeah.
feel this primal urge. And, you know, I think a lot of people struggle with this too, with this choice, because it's like there's so many choices. Like, how do I choose one?
Mm,
And
mm-hmm,
because they think that they choose with this. You do not choose with this.
mm,
This is to steer with. The choice comes from here. The
yeah.
choice, like, do you know human design at all?
No, not really.
Yeah, so in human design, I'm a generator, which it's the most common type, but it's like the way it was described to me, like it's like your will, your soul
Mm,
speaks to you through your body and it tells you, do I have the gas for this?
Hmm.
Like when you like whether it's a person, whether it's a thing, an enterprise. So that's what this guy's holding the world in his hands, and it looks like maybe he's making a choice here, but the choice is happening here. The
Yeah.
choice is his will is saying, I want X, Y, or Z, and I want it enough that I'm going to bridge that distance. I'm going to go across that water. I'm going to climb that mountain. Whatever it is, I know in my gut, I know in my soul, I have the will to do that.
Well, the body knows before the mind does. I mean,
Absolutely.
like there was, um, there were studies of like people's like physical impulse before their brain had the time to process the information. It's like you have the physical impulse. I'm reminded of um uh of situations where I just started going towards something. Like I remember seeing a person lay their hand on their dog and I just fucking started running at them. Like I wasn't thinking that I was running across the street where there was traffic. My body was just like going after.
Yeah.
I was ready to
Yep.
pummel that guy. You
Right.
know, it's like that you're the instinctual response of like
That
the
mother
body
bear.
knows
Yeah.
knows what the right choice is, even if maybe it isn't logically the safest for you. It's like your
Right.
body is just, because we are
Dude,
connected,
think
you
about
know?
it. Like we were hunter gatherers for like millions of years.
Yeah.
Like there's so much wisdom stored in our DNA that is before we took on civilization and all of the whatever. Like there's you're I always tell people they get into these loops with the like dogma around magic and like the rituals and all the stuff, and I'm like, look, you're in a loop. Like trust your gut, man.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not gonna play this game of like going through all the loops and like trying to juggle 17 different choices with you. Like what does your gut tell you?
Yeah.
Because you can always trust that. Like
Yeah.
that's I think the lesson of that, even though it's not fully apparent, but notice that the world is below his heart chakra. All
Mm.
of like the scenery cuts him literally in half,
Mm. Mm-hmm.
right at the heart chakra. So all of the but he's holding the globe up here. So it's like he's trying to take this information that's in his lower chakras and make sense of it, maybe.
Mm.
Yeah, like maybe he's got the impulse from his lower chakras and now he's like, okay, how do I steer that impulse with my
Right.
mind?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's yeah. That's the way. To me, it's like the head is for steering and the gut is for driving, man.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, one thing I wanted to just comment on about like the stereotype of Aries is like just, you know, ready to fight, ready to like put your horns down and just like go after anybody that challenges you, you know, like that ready to move.
Yeah.
But the Emperor as Aries, you know, it's not just the action, it's the sustaining of that action too. You know, it's
Right.
like moving into the 3 of Wands card and having the sun. It's like there is responsibility of maintaining what you've fought for. It's not just fighting for fighting's sake. It's
Yes.
fighting because there's the fire, there's the passion, there's the reason, there's the purpose, there's the mission, all of that. It's like otherwise it's just wasted energy of just setting things aflame and then not sustaining it.
Yeah, it's
And
kind of like, if you look at if one of the things I think is so instructive, and if you've ever written horoscopes, hopefully you get it. But when I used to write horoscopes, I would have each of the wheels with the sign, rotated to the first house
mm-hmm,
essentially, and then I would have the wheel. So when you look at the entire wheel from point of view of Aries, the fourth house is Cancer, right?
mm,
So why does the warrior fight? Because he cares. There's
mm,
Look, of course, there's always soldiers of fortune who fight for money, and there's sort of, the Greeks saw Aries as an Ares, the Mars,
right.
you know, as like this bloodthirsty dude that was, kind of beneath them. I don't really think that's the Aries, Aries archetype at all. I think Aries fights because they care.
Mm,
It's like that impulse to fight comes from the same place as the impulse to go and be and to exercise that dominion. It comes from your gut. It comes from your soul of like, I care deeply about my family, my home, my homeland, whatever.
mm-hmm.
And that's why I choose to put my, like the ultimate sacrifice. I tell people a lot of times, I think maybe, if there is anything to reincarnation, maybe the way you get Aries placements is by making the ultimate sacrifice. If you're
Mm.
willing to do that, you get to have Aries planets.
That's the prize. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't
I
know.
mean,
In my world, it works.
yeah. Well, there is this sense of sacrifice. Like Mars does require sacrifice.
Yeah,
I mean, that's kind of the ticket to entry for Mars. Like
absolutely.
you can't enter any other way.
Even if it's just the sacrifice of that other choice, right? There's two.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
like you have to let one go,
Yeah. Because when you
perhaps
say
the other
yes
one.
to something,
You're
you're
saying no
saying
to
no to
everything
everything.
else.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well,
And
let's
that's
move
where,
on to the
yeah.
three. Like, how do you see that story continue? I mean, his body language changes, and to me, the on the two of wands, he's kind of in a civilized place, like he's in a castle. But the three, he is like, it looks to me like he's over all of the land, not just
Hmm.
the sexy prize that he won from conquering, but like the entirety of it. And I
He's
hadn't
had to
noticed that the
move
sea
from
was
his,
golden.
yeah, he's had to move from his sanctuary. So let's just say like where we locate him in the two, right? If
Mm-hmm.
now he's like out on the edge of those mountains, looking out over the bay. Okay, there go my ships, right? There
Yeah.
goes I've taken a measured risk and I've sent some ships out and like, it's really interesting because the whole nautical metaphor, in Hellenistic astrology,
Mm-hmm.
it
Yeah.
reminds me of that, and to
Yeah.
some degree, like, um, but no, that's a really good point. Like he's not in the comfort of his castle anymore. He's out on the edge. And like that to me is where Aries belongs. They
Mm.
belong on the edge.
Mm.
Like they are never going to be happy sitting in that castle. Like
No.
they'll come back and they'll chill. Yeah, sure. But
And
if
they
they
might throw a
can't,
party in the four of wands.
yeah, yeah, exactly. But if they can't be out on that edge every now and
Mm.
then, they will cease to be themselves and they'll get cranky and nasty, and that dark side will come out where they start trying to control other people and all that nonsense,
Mm.
because they don't have that vitality that comes from being on the edge and like
Yeah.
testing themselves and finding out what's beyond that next. To me, like the ultimate Aries archetype is the pioneer.
Mm-hmm.
It's the person that goes beyond what was previously known. Like that's what humans have done forever, as far as
Yeah.
we know, right? Like the
Yeah.
first humans were in Africa and they just kept freaking going.
Yeah.
Like the whole thing in Star Trek, like, like to boldly go where no one has gone before,
Yeah.
like, that to me is like the Aries impulse. Like, yeah, sometimes it requires war. More often than not, it just requires a willingness really to go places that most people are not too uncomfort. It's too uncomfortable for them to go.
Mm-hmm. So my sister is a Aries sun, 12th house Aries sun, and she has so many archetypal Aries stories. But my favorite one is she went to a work party and it was on a train, and the train was not moving. It was just on train cars. And she showed
Huh.
up, and the story goes is that she just bulldozed through the crowd of people, through all the train cars, and like made her way into the engine room to try to start the train to get it to move, because she was like, we're on a train, why isn't it moving? Like, and she got kicked off of the work party because she broke into the engine room. And I just love it. It's like, point what's the point at all of having a train party if it's not going to move? It's just going to be sitting here.
Dude, when we were at UAC, the big astrology gathering that the orgs do or whatever in New Orleans,
Mm-hmm.
I broke into the roof of the hotel. I was up on the roof of the hotel
Yeah,
like this, dude. I just wanted to be there. Like, I don't even remember why. It's just because,
because you were in New Orleans, you want to see the
yeah, I
city.
wanted to
Yeah.
see like, the whole city and whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I feel I feel
Yeah.
like your sister and I would be a bad team to party together, man.
She's a good, she's, Taurus rising, so she seems um
Right.
like more amenable than she actually is. Like she is,
Right.
she's a Aquarius Venus too, so she's,
Oh wow.
She's nobody, and Leo moon. So like nobody's gonna tell her what to
Oh
do.
wow, yeah.
Yeah.
Holy smokes, man. That's
And
some
she's a
that
farmer, she's got Saturn and Mars and Gemini.
mm.
And she is definitely a hardcore farmer, but she's a force. That's what she is. She's a total
Yeah,
force.
that fixed energy behind a cardinal sign is like real power. You
Yeah.
know, the cardinal signs don't, it's like it's ephemeral
Mm-hmm.
energy,
Yeah.
but when you get that fixed energy to back it up, whew, and
Yeah.
then you get the mutability, the adjustability of the
Mm-hmm.
mutable signs on top of that. Yeah, because they're not going to stop. And if you try to stop them, they're going to mutable around it.
Yeah. 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 She's the
That's
best.
funny. So
Um,
I guess
so
we'll move it to the four.
yeah, let's talk about the four. So I like the four just because it is that the Empress as Venus and the Emperor as Mars, kind of
Joining.
being that like refined union,
Yeah.
joining a power. And there's like a celebration aspect of this. Is this it looks like a wedding,
Yeah.
there's two characters together.
Yeah. And that
Um,
gate is meant to represent like in traditional weddings, the gate, like they would go through the gate because it's like you're not single anymore. You're
yeah,
married. Like there was this, it's a rite of passage. It's not
yeah,
just and it's meant to signify their passage into another phase of life, right?
yeah.
So
Well, any sort of threshold, going through a threshold, it's like there is no return. Like once
exactly.
you
Yeah.
like once you become that other version of yourself,
Especially back in the day, like there was no divorce.
right?
Unless you were Henry which Henry was it,
The
the eighth
eighth,
or
yeah.
whatever. Right. I mean,
Yeah,
good
and the
grief,
dudes could remarry, but if you were widowed, you couldn't remarry,
right.
in most
So
cultures. So
there's
it
so
really
much
it was the symbolism of when
no
you
return.
create that union, there's no idea of a return. It's like it's only forward.
Yeah, that's it,
Yeah.
right? So yeah. So that gate is really prominent in that. But of course,
Mm-hmm.
in the background, there's that castle. And so now the castle in the first card could almost be seen as a prison, like he's looking beyond it, like I got to get out of here.
Mm.
And now it's almost like in T.S. Eliot's poem of like where he returns home to know it for the first time. Now he's got a partner, and he can return back to the castle like as someone who has a reason to stay there.
Where it's not a prison anymore, but it
Yeah,
becomes that castle. Yeah.
yeah, that home,
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, and I like Venus. I mean, Venus is exiled here, because she's at home in Libra, but because she's the Decan ruler, it's like she has a seat that's all hers in that part of Aries.
yeah,
Like she
yeah,
belongs there, even if it might feel a little, I don't know. Venus here just feels rebellious and like she just does what she wants and she's empowered with that Mars. Um,
yeah,
some people call it like a safe haven or a refuge, or Rivendell before on the road to Mordor sort of a
mm,
thing, but
hmm,
um I don't know, it has, I like the foil that Venus has right here.
yeah,
She's exciting and she's celebrated and she's not docile. She's just real invigorating here. So I think it doesn't make sense at first on paper. It's similar to what you were talking about with the two. It's like, but in your heart, it feels right, even if maybe you can't intellectualize it. It's like Venus and Aries is kind of just fucking fun, you know?
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I have Venus and Aries, but it's in the first decan, so it doesn't have that dignity of the
Mm,
third decan. But yeah, like, I love solar feminine women who have that, like your
mm,
sister. Like, we would have so much fun. Like I said, we'd be dangerous together.
yeah.
But
She's kind of
that,
dangerous with everybody, to be honest.
but that sort of mixture of the opposites, right? In alchemy, they talk about make the fixed volatile and the volatile fixed.
Mm, hmm.
So the reason why Venus is seen to be, in her debility in Aries is because she's as far from her natural place in Libra
Right.
as possible, right? but there's a kind of power in that too, in that she's not boxed into the Libra, like Libra. There's certain things that
Prescription. Yeah.
Libra would never do that Aries is like, "Psh, yeah, like let's get this train moving, yo."
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? No
Well, I'm
Libra
thinking
would
about
even
it.
think that.
Well, I'm thinking of, sorry, my cat's about to jump up. You can't knock everything over.
Come on,
Um,
kitty kitty.
so I think of uh, when you travel and you just have your backpack, or maybe you have luggage. But if you travel and you're waking up in a different hostel or hotel or friend's couch, you don't have to do anything. You can just get up and you can leave. You can get up and you can just see the best things of whatever your environment has.
Yep,
And
there's a
so the
freedom.
idea of exile is, you're unencumbered by the responsibilities of being in your own home. And then
Yeah,
it
it's true.
also can make you, yeah, you're going to have to work harder to find a shower. You're going to have to work harder to like find the things that you like to eat. You're going to have to work harder maybe to find allies. You might be surrounded by people that are strangers that you assume are enemies. It might
Yep.
be a little
Johnny
bit
Cash.
exhausting,
Johnny
but
Cash, Venus and Aries, like he grew up on a cotton farm. He was an artist, right?
yeah,
He ended up in the military to get away from the cotton farm. He joined the army and he was still surrounded by people that were like these Mars figures. And it
yeah,
wasn't until he met Sam Phillips that somebody was like,
mm-hmm,
okay, you're an artist. Like I'm going to give you the right, you know, environment to flourish. And then what
yeah,
did he do? He continued to surround himself with people. He said, I want to make an album in prison. And they said,
yeah,
Johnny, you're fucking crazy, man.
yeah.
Like, and he did it, and it was like one of the best selling live albums of all time,
Yeah, it makes you
right?
resourceful,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
it makes you like, yeah, be that foil to your natural conditions. And that's the only thing that keeps us from just being tumors to ourselves, is like having that disruption. Yes, the disruption can be exhausting, but it also it lets you live an interesting life,
Yeah,
how
there's a
double-edged that
mixture of
is.
opposites, like the fixed and the volatile. Like being in its own domicile planet can get almost too comfortable, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but
Yep.
being and like I said, I think, like look at what they call this card, the Lord of Perfected Success. I mean, that doesn't
Mm.
sound like a minor dignity to me. And I feel like um that, what Schmidt said was like, for instance, whenever a planet is in any of its dignities, it's immune to combustion,
Mm. Mm-hmm.
right? Because it's like a traveler in a covered chariot. It's
Yeah.
protected from the rays of the sun. So
Yeah.
it's immune to combustion. I feel like it's probably immune to debility to some degree also. Like,
Mm.
even though like, oh, it's a minor dignity compared to like domicile or whatever. First of all, I don't necessarily buy that 100%.
Mm-hmm.
And second of all, I think it's modified like the same way that it would be modified in the case of combustion. I think it's modified here because it's a very positive card, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Yeah. Um,
um
I feel like we ought to bring up Kelly Lee's thing before I forget.
Yeah, yeah, I was gonna say, you said you had graphics, so I'm gonna stop share, but then I'm gonna allow you to.
Awesome. Thank you.
I think you should be able to. Oh no, there you go.
See, there we go. So yeah, so I was talking about like the multivalency of Aries. Let's see if I can get this. Whoops.
So I still have my reading from him. I have the CD of the recording, and then I have the printouts, and it's that.
Is
That's at
it?
the top. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, just look at the different words that he's using, and almost like you can almost see it like Kelly did not fit in any box. Like Kelly
Mhm.
knew, like even before we get to like essential dignities, like the four qualities that define the elements. We did a video on that. Like Kelly was a very smart guy, so he wasn't like, but he wasn't like willing to limit himself to being a Hellenistic astrologer or a medieval astrologer, or like he wanted to be all that.
Yeah.
So there's almost like an evolutionary astrology, because that's the way he saw the five Chinese elements, was like an evolving, flowing, it's Tao, it's a flow.
Hmm.
So you can see how maybe you would start as the entrepreneur, right? And then you might become the manager or the administrator. Sorry, this is Capricorn. The same process applies.
Yeah.
So you could see how you might start out as the daredevil, right? And then move into the warrior or the adventurer. And you can see how an adventurer eventually becomes a pioneer or a
Mm-hmm.
trailblazer, right? So there's like this multivalency of Aries that it's not, if you just say warrior, like that's so limiting. It's so like, it's kind of like the same thing as saying like, assuming that women vote a certain way or black people vote a certain way, like that's ridiculous.
Mm.
It's not a monolith, right?
Right, right.
Um, and so I love this graphic where he's just talking about the very like one of the first things, when I was a kid, I wanted to be like Evil Knievel, man.
Mm-hmm.
I got a BMX bike and I jumped that thing over like trash cans and stuff until I
Yeah,
broke the wheel off of it.
yeah. Because you're seeking that. It's like you're within your environment as a kid, there's only, it's like learning the different layers of what your limits are,
Yeah. Yeah,
and like as a
exactly.
kid, like your limits is mostly your neighborhood and
Right.
your own close relationships. So you're going to just push along the edge of that,
Yep. And then I
but
started learning to go beyond my neighborhood. Like I would find new places to go fishing that I could walk to because I didn't have a car and
mm-hmm.
and stuff. And then, you know, wasn't, but when I was a really small kid, I remember like reading Aries horoscopes or whatever and thinking like, who is that asshole?
Yeah,
Like what are they
yeah,
even talking about, man?
yeah.
Because I didn't get it. I didn't feel, maybe it's because I'm a nocturnal birth and I'm like Virgo moon,
Mm.
probably a lot of that. But at the same time, it's like just like this monolith of the warrior, like Daredevil is really they're, an athlete is really in competition against themselves,
Mm-hmm.
you know. Um, and that's like I loved football as a team sport, though you were kind of, but like wrestling, it was just you
Mm.
and there was nobody else to blame if you didn't win, but yourself.
Yeah,
And so like that idea that Mars is about excellence, it's about finding your limits, like and trying to exceed them.
yeah. A friend
Um,
of mine has got a lot of Aries placements and just remembered the story how when he was in high school, he played guitar and he loved Van Halen. That was like his band, right?
oh
And so
yeah, dude, that
he
was that
would
like the 80s,
yeah, so he said he would hear that another kid played guitar and it would like enrage him,
right?
and he would go home and he would just play harder and harder and harder and harder. He had no idea how, if they did or not, and how good they were, but like just hearing that someone else in his class played guitar, it would make him, he just would get so fired up,
That
that
competitive
fuel, and he would
spark.
that competitive spark, and it
Yeah.
just made him like a really he's a really excellent
Yeah,
guitar
athletes
player.
will almost like invent trash talk just so they have something to get fired up about,
Yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah.
like
So
but
I
yeah,
think
like
that the thrill seeker is always within Aries too. That's the thing. It's like it's just different. Like it's like looking at it through a different like
and that's
point
the
of
thing,
the
like I don't
jewel,
think a lot of people realize like that dopamine rush that we get from like social media likes, that's
Mm,
thrill seeker.
yeah,
That's thrill seeker behavior. You're seeking that dopamine rush. It doesn't matter if it's like under a social media guise.
yeah.
You're
It's
being,
still dopamine.
you're
Yeah.
being, yeah, you're being programmed to like seek that thrill of
Mm-hmm.
whatever. And it's like, so like, are you going to seek cheap thrills or are you going to seek real thrills?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
what kind of thrill seeker are you going to be? And if it's interesting, like notice how the warrior adventurer is like if you go across the star,
To the
it's like
pioneer.
it's the pioneer trailblazer. So it's like if you're busy, fighting battles all the time, you're not going to necessarily get to be on the pioneer
Hmm.
because you're stuck in one place fighting these battles. On the other hand, if you sign up to be part of a campaign, you're going to end up going places you never went before because the battles are going to take you
They're gonna
there.
move.
So
Yeah.
um it's just a really, I thought it was a really interesting diagram that would give people some sense of the multivalency. And then um let's see, there's this thing too that he has. And by the way, people Kelly's mom, Brenda, put all this stuff on Facebook. So there's a URL down there where you can go and like download this stuff because
Okay.
um so let's see. And then yeah, so he kind of gives, this is classic like who's that lady that did the cosmic astrology? I'm trying to think, what was her name? I'm trying to think, like a cosmic science, Isabel Hickey. This is like
Oh
classic.
yeah.
I call it old lady astrology. It's like, when I was coming up, that's like it was mostly like these old lady astrologers who were really like Hecate. They were wise,
Yeah.
wise, Um, but like you have these like cultivated expressions versus shadow expressions, right? And so there's like let me just bring this up. So like headstrong and fierce, being like um more positive expressions of angry and belligerent,
Right.
right?
Right.
Um, and then like with the hero or champion, there's an egotistical and dominating, like when competition becomes not friendly anymore, when you're like literally trying to like put other people down, and
Right.
you know what I'm saying? Like that's not the true spirit. I was watching that movie about the rowing team that was out recently,
Oh, Boys in a
uh,
Boat.
Boys in a Boat,
Yeah.
right? And they
I've heard,
had this,
heard a lot of people talk about that.
oh
Yeah.
my God, it's so good. I loved it, man. And there's like these working class kids in like the depression, and they end up winning the gold medal like in their first time out rowing boats. It's incredible. But one of those things is like they had this rivalry with Cal. They were like University of Washington, right? And they had this rivalry with University of California, and they they had to raise money to, even after they beat Cal and got the right to go to the Olympics, they had to raise money, and they were like, I can't remember. I think it was like $300 short or whatever, which back then would have been like, this was like Hitler's Olympics, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so, and the Cal coach came and like wrote them a check. He was like, "You guys deserve to go." And the
Mm.
thing is, if they hadn't raised the money, Cal would have ended up going.
Oh, wow.
But he was like, "No, you guys won. You deserve to go."
Yeah.
He wrote him a check from his person. And I was just like, man, that's the real spirit of competition. That's the true spirit of
Mm-hmm.
Olympics. Like it's a test, and it's a test on like, it doesn't just test your physical abilities, it tests your moral
Mm-hmm.
compass and all that stuff. And
That's my favorite thing, honestly, about fire signs in general, is there's this ability to just wield kind of that enlightened truth. There's like a no bullshit with a lot of
yeah.
fire, and yes, it can become, whether you call them shadow expressions or what, there's the human element. Not every fire sign is going to be honest all the time, but there's this impulse of knowing, and maybe it's that somatic knowing of like, this is right and this is wrong, or yes and no. And
Yeah.
like, it's like having that fire, that inner fire be amplified through a nativity, allows that clarity and action of like, this is the right thing to do, or
Yeah.
this is the right way it should be. There's a sense of justice with it.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
it's like that. And to have that, there is no like kind of going back and forth, because it's clear of what, it's either yes or no. There's just no discussion about it, because it's like
Right.
the truth reveals itself. And I feel like fire placements have that capacity to tap into that really easily, just because the fire gets itself known. It's not nuanced.
Yeah,
it's
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 not nuanced.
very
So
clear.
it's not like he was coming from some social justice like ideology of like, oh, this is the way it should be because so and so, because Marx
Right.
says this, and then, you know,
Right.
you know, whoever in the hell all that stuff is about, like, what's the other philosopher like? I can't even remember where all that stuff comes from, but it wasn't even like that. What he was coming from was like, look,
You
you
beat
know,
us. You're
yeah,
better.
like
You were going.
it,
Yeah.
it's this, like, the letter of the law says that I should sit back and let you guys not raise the money, and then I get to go, and I'm justified in going because, like, he could have easily in his head said, I'm just going to sit back and let these guys,
Yeah.
and we're going to go, and we're going to deserve to go, and they might have even won, who knows, but the spirit of the law was like, no,
Mm,
like, one-on-one competition. They beat us twice. They're
mm.
clearly the better team. They should go. So it's not ideological. It's more like in your heart,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's why like the colors for the emperor and just for Mars, like the black and red colors that come forth. It's like that red is like the blood. It's like the life force, behind it
Libido.
all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Libido is the blood, like, um, that's one of the things that I loved about, my publisher when it's Libido Press, right? And he
Mm,
talks about, I remember him putting on there, Aaron Cheek, he puts on there, we're looking for people who write with blood, like,
yeah. Yeah.
there's like this rawness
Yeah.
that's part of it. Yeah, and I feel like that rawness of, like, of living on the edge and being willing to step out to the edge and not like letting yourself be always hindered by the safe choices of staying in the castle,
Mm,
that's kind of that's sort of like the joie de vivre too, you know
mm-hmm.
like, you're going to pay for that at least as much as you get the rewards for that, by the
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, it's a risk. And when you go out to the edge, a lot of times it doesn't pay off, but then other times it does. But either way, you go away with this, like, feeling of vitality of, like, it was worth it
Mm-hmm.
because I was, I was willing to put my safety, aside and just venture out and see
Well,
what
if
was
you
out
look
there.
at just that two of wands, like the high risk, high reward of Aries, it's like he's like the Lord of Dominion, like you're gonna have to be pretty bold to make the choices to get you in the position that you could like have dominion
Yeah.
over a new land or over just your life choices,
Yeah.
maybe.
And yeah, I don't know, like, if very many people play chess or whatever, but, like, I don't, like, for some, like, you can get lost in, like, oh, the this gambit or that gambit, and there's all this complex strategy, but chess is so simple.
Mm,
It's like the white pieces move first, and the whole idea of the game is to preserve that one move advantage. You
yeah.
have you have one move head start, and everything you do has to be aggressive enough to preserve that advantage. Because as soon as you get behind, then now the other side is gonna, and
Do
so
that
it's
same
like
thing.
that,
Yeah.
that first mover advantage is so, like, if just being willing to just go do it, even though you don't know how, even though, like, just saying yes, there's a boldness to that is often, um outweighs, like, whatever safe decision that you could have made, like, in the even though in the long run it's kind of like the tortoise and the hare almost,
Mm,
like, but yeah, that willingness to just, like, lay it on the line and be like, okay, you know like in poker, like Texas Hold'em poker, where you just, like, all in, like,
yeah.
that's how you eliminate the other players on the table. You go, you take them all in, and
Yeah.
it's like, but you
Yeah.
got to be willing to, like, okay, that's the end of my tournament. There's not another World Series for another year.
Yeah. I'm reminded of the phrase of like it's easier to ask for forgiveness than permission, just
Oh
do
my
it.
God, dude. I learned that lesson. Yeah, because I have a Libra South node, and so,
Yeah.
like, I can get into that people pleasing really easy,
Mm,
actually. And yeah, I realized, like, when I started pushing boundaries and, like, going places where I didn't necessarily have permission to go,
mm,
but I wasn't told I couldn't either.
mm-hmm.
And figuring out, like, yeah, most of the time, like, as long as there isn't a specific prohibition,
Yeah.
it's going to be worth it.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I haven't really considered where it is, where I see it in my chart, but I'm perpetually curious and I try all door handles. Like seriously, like find an abandoned place or find a church or whatever, find a industrial building. I'll just see if the door's open. That's all it takes. And then you just, it served me when I was younger and would go to shows and I would be, well, I didn't drink underage for the most part. I just would just want to see music. And so I just showed up and I acted like I belonged there. I wasn't causing a scene. I just was like, I, if the door is open, I'm going to go through it and I'm just going to pretend that I belong there. And
That's
it
it.
and it, it's like it's the fake it till you make it. It's there's the boundary is only there because you believe that it's there. And
Right.
yes, sometimes I would come up against the law. Yes, sometimes I would come up against the doorman or
Get bounced. Yeah.
security, get bounced, whatever. It did nothing. It was like it was worth the adventure to feed my curiosity of like what's down this hallway.
Right.
Um, it's it's as long as you're not doing it just to be reckless, because I think that can be the shadow side of like, I'm not trying to
Yeah.
get caught, I'm not trying to get hurt, I'm not trying to get assaulted, I'm not trying to get
Right.
kidnapped, I'm trying to have an
Yeah.
adventure and just see. I remember being down in Jacksonville, Florida in the 90s, and I there was an old hotel that was downtown. This is Jacksonville is probably pretty nice now, but then it was kind of run down. And I just went around the back, and there was a broken window. And I just crawled in, and it was like a 13, 14th floor building. And I just went up the stairs. There were these beautiful old chandeliers everywhere and beautiful
Dude,
hotel
I used to
rooms.
squat in buildings like that when I was
Yeah.
homeless, and I had the whole place to myself. I was like in a castle, right? I
Yeah.
was like, I was
Yeah.
painting the walls with all kinds of like esoteric stuff and everything. It's like, this is awesome, man. I would hole up in a squat like that. I'd get a pile of books from the library,
Hmm.
gather some food, and I would hole up in a squat like that for weeks and just be happy as a clam.
Yeah.
It
Yeah,
was
it's like
awesome.
it and I think if you just have enough of your antennas up to like keep you protected and safe enough, and just be willing to just again be willing to just bolt.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I mean,
it's a reminder that everything is temporary anyway, so
yeah.
like not being hung up and stuck in
Yeah.
that,
I
but then
mean, the
you have like
shadow,
these experiences that you would not have
right.
otherwise.
Yeah. The shadow, I think, of all that is like the James Dean thing, live fast and die young,
Hmm.
which is really tragic. And it's like if you make that decision and you'll I mean, to me, like life is sort of protective of itself in a way. Like if you're living fast and like you'll get so many chances to be
Hmm.
rescued from those choices
Yeah,
usually. But if you keep making that choice, oh yeah, I'm just going to live fast and die alone, like eventually the powers that be or whatever way you want
like
to
you're
frame it, are
asking
going to
for
say,
it. Yeah.
okay, dude, like that's you like there you go, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the way he did die, and it's kind of tragic. I mean, it's more I don't know if it's who it's more tragic for. Like it's almost more tragic for the people that are left behind, you
For
know?
sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I think, in a way, I think that our souls ask for things maybe that we don't verbalize. And for situations like him, and, I've lost friends
Me
similarly.
too.
And,
Brothers.
it's like, I feel like you were kind of asking for that the whole time, like that maybe that's what you wanted. Like maybe that's what you wanted to experience and you didn't want to linger. Like that was the thing, is like they didn't want to be bored. They didn't want to linger. They didn't want to
Right?
decay. They wanted to just shoot upwards and they didn't want to fall back down. They just wanted to keep going.
I mean, you got to kind of just, I guess, honor that,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not easy, it's like there's many times where like, and not that Kelly made those choices, but we lost Kelly at, a young age.
Yeah.
And man, I would love to. I mean, I remember the last time I saw him, was in the airport after that UAC in New Orleans that I was talking about, where I was up on the top of the hotel and
Mm-hmm.
dropped him off at the airport. And I mean, I thought I would see that cat many times. I mean, I thought
Yeah.
like we would be hanging out the rest of our lives.
Yeah.
But you just don't know. And so, and I miss that because, I hadn't really become a part of any astrology scene before that. I had just been, I mean, I spent like 10 years of just solitary study before I ever even went to like an astrology meeting or anything. And then
Mm-hmm.
when I finally started coming out as a professional was when I got to Asheville, and Kelly was like the first person to really embrace that,
Mm.
and to be welcome me into any kind of community.
Yeah.
And so I miss him, man. And it's really hard to to just stay like that, like you were talking about, make that choice of staying hopeful and optimistic, when that it's like there's a hole in your life
Yeah.
from that.
He
But
was a huge hole too. I mean, like it's I feel the same way when I meet other people that knew him. There's like this immediate kinship. I'm like, if you knew him, I don't have to explain him, because even if I try to explain him, it just pales in comparison to how much space he took up. Like
yeah.
he took up all the space, and we welcomed him to take that space up. There was a one of my favorite moments that just cracks me up, and it just still makes me laugh, is um, a friend of ours is a Sagittarius sun, and I was standing next to him, Kelly, and her, when she walked up, and he was like, "Oh, like, when's your birthday?" And she told him, and he was like, "Oh, I could have guessed that with your big horsey laugh and your big horsey smile." And we just were like, "What?" And she did have a big horsey laugh and a big horsey smile, but it just seemed kind of like an offensive thing to say to somebody. But it was so funny. Like he just flipped everything on its head, and it
Yep.
and made it so approachable. I earlier, or I guess last year, there's a used bookstore here that I frequent, and
Mm.
usually has pretty good astrology books. I don't know who just keeps supplying the
Is it
astrology
the
books.
downtown?
Not downtown, but Mr. K's,
Okay.
that's in Oakley, and downtown Books and News is still good, but it's just impossible to park there at this point. So I get
I
a
know, right? Dude, I used to just walk because I lived in 28801. I used to just walk down there like once a
yeah,
week just to
yeah,
see like what do they got.
yeah, yeah. I
'Cause
love,
that's how I started my career. All my whole library was like, but if I had $5 like a week extra because I was so poor, and I would
yeah,
literally save $5 a week and go to the used bookstore and be like, okay,
yeah,
feed my astrology habit, right?
yeah, yeah. My first book, I like to bring it out like the this was the very first book I ever bought.
Nice. Yeah.
And it's like the very copy that I got
I
at a,
lived I lived near her in Cripple Creek, Colorado for a brief time, and I used to walk up and down the road where they told me where she lived at, but I never saw her. I wanted to
yeah,
see her and wanted to meet her.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Um, yeah, my favorite thing about just that book is all the Alice in Wonderland quotes that are in it. And the one for Aries was like, I think I've believed 6 impossible things before breakfast. Just feels so Aries. Oh, but what I was gonna say, so I was at Mr. K's, and I was just kind of scanning the esoteric books, and I saw Kelly Lee Phipps on a spine. I was like, what? And I'd never had his book before. So I
Celestial
picked it
Renaissance.
up. The yeah. And so
Excellent.
I pick it up, and I open it up, and he had signed it, and he just said, keep on traveling. And it just seemed
Uh-huh.
like that's kind of what, like,
Yeah,
I miss him,
but
and
he's
but then he's right there.
yeah.
And so then the crazier thing, so I kind of, my hands were shaking. I bought the book and I was leaving, and then there was a signed Neil Gaiman Anansi Boys, which is one of my favorite books of his.
Mm,
And I was like, holy cow, there's a signed Neil Gaiman, like it's like $600. I'm not going to buy it. But I opened it
wow.
up to kind of like run my fingers over the ink. It's like, I just had this book that I found. Like, it feels like Kelly signed it for
Mm,
me. Like, he's
mhm.
just like reaching out through, and I go to that bookstore every week. It
Right,
had just been there.
right.
It felt like he was kind of reaching through time to kind of be like,
Wow.
here you go, just keep on traveling, girl.
Yeah, that's
And when I
incredible.
when I opened up the Neil Gaiman book, Neil Gaiman had written, like, don't you hate when you open up a signed book and it's always to somebody else? Well, this one is definitely for you. And it was like for like Joanna or whatever, but it felt like this crossing of messages of like, Kelly was like, read this, like, this is definitely for you.
Wow.
um
That's incredible,
and
man.
that's like, I miss him, and I like so grateful just to have been in his orbit. I
Definitely.
love meeting people that also knew him.
Yeah.
Um, just because
Some of
I
the best memories of my life, man. We watched the Super Bowl together in like the old Nashville Pizza and Brewing,
uh-huh,
in
yeah.
the theater, and like we're jumping up and just hugging each other and stuff. It's
Yeah.
like stupid guy stuff, but he was like my Astro bro,
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. So he still feels like he's around just like through this, like being able to connect with you and like meet you in this realm. Cause I mean, I've read about astrology, since I was 15, but I've come, I've just lived life, and
right.
astrology's always just been in my back pocket. It was never something that I did for other people. It was only the past couple of years that I started
Yeah.
to kind of reveal that to people outside of my immediate circle.
Mm-hmm.
Mostly because, I just kept it to myself. It was just my prize. And
Mm-hmm.
so I'm late to an astro community for that, just because I was like, I'm just doing my own thing. Like, I don't,
Well,
and
welcome.
yeah,
It's good to see you. I'm happy you're here. And
yeah.
I think, the title of Kelly's book was so prescient
Mm,
because, I mean, the guy was a dreamer and I'm a dreamer, so I appreciate that. But even I, at some point, was like Celestial Renaissance. Like at some point in time, like not long after that, like Richard Tarnas was giving this talk, which was a talk that like, like that British astrologer, I'm trying to think of his name. Like every once in a while, people will trot out this talk of astrology's on the edge of a breakthrough and blah, blah, blah. And like, I used to think, yeah, like probably not, whatever. But
yeah.
we are in the middle of a celestial renaissance, dude. Like astrology has become like totally, it's exploded 1,000 times beyond what it was when I was,
Oh, yeah.
even when I was in Asheville and before, and so I think there's room for everybody. Like I'm
Hmm.
not one of these people like, and it's not because like I don't want to be a gatekeeper because of some ideology or whatever. It's because I think the thing is literally limitless. And if
It
the thing
is.
is
Yeah.
literally limitless, then of course there's room for everybody. You know what
Yeah.
I'm saying? Like, duh.
Yeah.
And
A friend of mine, I was on her podcast and she was like, well, what do you have to say to people that are new to astrology? And I'm like, just sing in your own voice. Like,
exactly.
don't mimic what you have seen other people be successful
Well,
with,
it's okay if
because
you
that's
lean.
theirs,
Well, we're apes, Krista. I mean, come on.
right?
You know what I'm saying? Like we're gonna ape, we're gonna mimic.
For
That's
sure.
okay, but don't get stuck there. Like
Right.
eventually, like it's kind of like in shamanism, like you might start out, the shaman might give you a copy of their medicine bundle
Mm-hmm.
to start out with, but
Mm-hmm.
then you're supposed to find your own medicine.
Yeah.
So like, yeah, so and that's the thing. That's the Ars Magna. That's the great art. The
Mm.
great art, the most incredible thing you can do is fulfill all of the promise in your birth chart.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
it. Like that's if you can fulfill all of that, holy crap, man.
Yeah.
Like you've really done something.
Yeah.
So yeah, like living life, like that's the other thing. Like astrology is not everything. You got to go and live life and so like, and I got that, like, I didn't become a full-time professional until I had been studying astrology like 13 years
Mm-hmm.
before I finally went full-time.
Yeah.
So I get
Yeah.
it. I know what you're talking about. And, but yeah, I feel like there's enough room for everybody, for every point of view. And like, um, and I encourage people like to like you said, sing in your own voice, find your unique, like that axe that Austin talks about, the first decan of Aries.
Mm.
Carve out that clearing in the forest that's your
Mm-hmm.
own unique place and build your log cabin, right?
Yeah.
And like that's your place. You made it for yourself. You earn that right.
Mm-hmm.
You have that right just because you're here, because you're human. You have that right to create that space for yourself. And so go for it. Like I feel like there's anybody who wants to do that should absolutely just be that Mars and
Mm-hmm.
first at decan of Aries and just build that. And um it's beautiful. There's so many. God, I think it would probably take, I don't know, like 10 lifetimes or something to do all of it. You know
Right.
what
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm saying? Maybe more. So So yeah, I feel like we've covered Aries pretty good though. What do you think?
Yeah. I was going to ask, do you have personal practice that you would share with people? Like, what do you do for equinox or just for Aries season? Like,
Yeah. So yeah, like it's pretty simple for me. Like I go and see the sunrise on the
mm,
first day that, so like if the Aries ingress is like at 7 p.m. on the previous day, I go see the next sunrise.
mm-hmm,
First sunrise when the sun is in Aries at sunrise.
yeah.
I go and see the sunrise and I just kind of welcome him into my heart, into my life. And, maybe I'll, if I have that Two of Wands decision that I've
Mm,
made,
mm-hmm,
I'll ask, please bless this venture.
mm,
If I don't, I might ask, please bless me with the knowing of what choice is like, guiding me,
yeah. Yeah.
something like that. But to me, the actual like astrology is experiential. It's meant to be done with your face as much as like on, charts and whatever, like
That's
going
Aries
and seeing a
coded.
sunrise.
See it
Huh?
with your face. I said that's
Yeah,
Aries coded.
exactly. Like that stargazing. And I did a thread on Twitter. It's like pinned on my or X or whatever. It's the one that's pinned on my profile, Hermetic Astro, if anybody wants to check it out. But that like traditional astrology to me is a misnomer.
Mm,
Like that's what I call classical astrology, which is kind of like in the middle. Like there's modern astrology, which is different from classical astrology.
mm-hmm,
But before classical astrology could come about, there was traditional astrology, which was the Babylonian, like these cats climbing the ziggurat and looking at the heavens every
mm,
morning, every evening. Like that to me, like when you have that kind of relationship with it, it's a ritual, and it's a ritual magic. It
mm-hmm.
and ritual magic, the point of ritual magic is not wish fulfillment,
Right.
to raise your consciousness, dude.
Yeah.
And so yeah, like that's it for me. Like
Mm,
going out with the sky, that's the thing. And just like or like, you know I mean, being born in that third decan, by that time, like around my birthday in Virginia, usually the dogwoods and the redwoods are in bloom, so like,
mm-hmm,
if I was like Native American, I would be born under the moon of the dogwoods, or,
mm-hmm.
whatever, like, what I'm saying? Like, so, or like just going out on a walk in nature and just feeling that urgency of like bursting forth of
Mm,
energy, you know, and that, and touching it with your hands and your feet and your and breathing it in, and
yeah.
just letting it infect you.
Yeah. I like the
Yeah.
idea of experience astrology through your face as being like the Aries lesson.
Yeah.
Like taste it, like smell it, hear
Yeah.
it, see it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like just let it descend down upon you.
Listen to the birds like singing the spring into existence,
Mm,
like feel that energy of that primal creation. Like, um, my publisher, Aaron Cheek, his famous philosopher is this guy named Jean Gebser, right? He talks about the ever-present origin is the name of his book.
mm,
That ever-present origin, like the world is constantly being created
mm.
anew, constantly. And that's what the Aries glyph represents. It's like that springing forth of that
Yeah.
primal origin energy,
Yeah.
and to me, that's our origin. That's the tradition. They're like reading Valens doesn't make you traditional, dude.
Right.
Sorry. Stargazing makes you traditional.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But something you said reminded me of like, before dawn, when you have those birds that sing to each other, they're singing to their mate that they survived the night. Like
absolutely.
that's like that song of hope of
I'm
like we
here.
made it. We made it.
Yes. Feels so good, man.
Yeah.
I'm like, I want to get out there.
Yeah, yeah.
It
Well,
literally brings me to tears when you can really connect with it. It's so transcendent. Like there's no ayahuasca experience, or I mean, I've never done ayahuasca actually, but I've done mushrooms or whatever. There's nothing like being up watching the sunrise, like stone cold sober. Like it's
mhm.
the most transcendent thing. Like even when I've been doing mushrooms or whatever else you can do,
Yeah.
meditation or Groff breath work, or like it's the most transcendent experience, like literally just crying tears of joy, seeing the world being born again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
even after, like, I had one of those moments that I mentioned before we started recording was I was driving on 240, like in my truck, and the sun broke through the clouds. It was like 4 o'clock in the afternoon, something. It
Yeah.
broke through the cloud, and it was like this instant warmth on my
Mm.
face. And I just became overcome. I was just crying, and I
Yep.
was like, the son of God. Like,
Life.
I was like, the son of God. I was like screaming, going like 70 miles an hour, like crying in ecstasy in the warmth of the sun. I was like
That. Do that. Yes.
overwhelmed. I
Yes.
was
Yes. That's
totally
it.
overwhelmed by it. It was like the sun, it was just
Yes.
like
Yeah.
so overwhelming.
You
Like,
got it, Krista. That's my
yeah.
prescription.
Yeah. I love the sun. I grew up on Tybee. So I grew up
Yeah.
where you had that conference last month.
Yeah.
And I love the sun, but sometimes you don't get to choose those moments. They just kind of they descend on
Yeah,
you.
that's true. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
only get those when you engage with it, though. So I could have
Exactly.
just
Yeah.
like put the visor up and like tried to get hide from it, but I was just like total instant connection to it. So
Mm, beautiful.
can you share, like, I'll put your website and all that in the
Yeah, so
description, but like, how do people find you, and like, what are you
yeah,
doing now? Like, what are the projects that you're working on?
right on. Thanks for asking. So the website is dreamastrologer.com, and I have links to like my podcast and my social media and everything right there on the front page. And then I do a monthly magical election report for
Mm,
my members. Um, where like, and I do like all like the planets, the decans, the fixed stars, the lunar mansions, all that. So
nice.
I have a house-based elections, and then every once in a while I'll create talismans, and they're only available to my members. So it's
Mm,
kind of, and the members can also access my archives. So I've been doing this full time since 2006. So I got a
wow.
ton of stuff like on the cloud, and you get access to that and stuff. So that's all stuff on my website. But yeah, we just got done with the third Sky Astrology Conference. And so this idea of doing astrology with your face, like I'm not just saying that, like it's literally like we get together and have conferences based around that. Like I took people out on the beach there at Tybee, and we saw Venus and Mars,
Mm-hmm.
in the morning. And so I'm hoping to find a place where I can do something like more regular,
Mm.
like maybe a yearly thing or something with that. Um, I just signed up. I'm going to be part of the astrologers co-op with you
Oh,
and
cool.
everybody. I'm going to be doing the Mercury retrograde pieces.
Oh, nice.
I'm doing a talk later this month for the CIA, this Cosmic Intelligence Agency, on the Mercury elemental year. What else? I'm trying to remember.
So
Like
your book, um is
Hermetica
it?
Triptycha, the
Yeah.
Volume 1, Mercury elemental year. Yeah, that's about the sort of, so like the concept is that the astrology of any given moment, like a birth chart or an electional chart or whatever, it's informed, like those planetary placements aren't actually static. They're
Mm,
constantly flowing.
mm-hmm.
So there's like the Mercury retrograde before an event and the Mercury retrograde after the event, like kind of like the concept of the prenatal lunation or the
Mm-hmm.
prenatal eclipse.
Yeah.
Like you can do the prenatal Mercury retrograde and it's going to tell you a lot. And
Huh.
so this year, all the Mercury retrogrades are happening in fire signs.
Right.
And because of that, Mercury spends as much time in the fire element as all the other signs combined. So
Wow.
it's like those houses of your chart where the fire signs are, there's a lot going on there. And
Huh.
and so you can just look like, okay, you get four sets of three, like which trigon I call it, is it like 1 5 9, is it 2 6 10, is it 3 7 11, or is it 4 8 12?
Mm-hmm.
That alone gives you a wealth of information about, okay, what's this year going to be like,
Hmm.
um
So I
so
ordered your book. It should be here today.
awesome.
Yeah,
Yay.
yeah. So I'm in a Mercury year.
I'll have to
So
get
when I
down to
saw
Nashville
that,
and make sure to sign it for you.
yeah, definitely. Yeah, that I was thinking about just Mercury being in fire. Mercury, or my fire trigon is second 10 6 as
Nice.
Scorpio rising. Um
So I
I
call
might.
that the trigon of mastery. So like
Mm,
resources, second house,
mm-hmm.
what you do with your resources develops skills, sixth house, and then what you do with your skills develops your career, 10th
Yeah,
house.
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm excited to read it just because it's been the theme the theme just of Mercury in general has been just very, very ever present. You know, I it's up to discussion of whether or not my Mercury is Cazimi. Like technically, it is in one tradition and isn't in another, but it feels
Dude,
it.
in practice, I feel like the Kazemi has potentially even more than a degree because I've been working with the Kazimis for a very long time. And like,
Yeah.
I would always encourage people to do stuff. And then they would, you know, like John Lennon said, life is what happens when you're busy making other
Mm-hmm.
plans, right? And it's so true. So
Yeah.
I'd be like, okay, here's the Kazemi date, and here, you guys need to do a ritual or whatever. And then people would inevitably be like, oh my God, I've got to work that day, or my kid's got a thing. And it's like,
Mm-hmm.
can I do the day before or the day after? And I'm like, well, I'm a Virgo moon. I'm like, really? You can't find a way?
Technically.
Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
day, dude. And
Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
like, I was like, okay, try the day before. And it works.
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, I mean, I definitely feel like the Hellenistic of 1 degree is easily doable
Yeah.
and probably a little bit more, but who knows? Like, it's kind of hard to like, where does combustion start? Maybe it's three.
Right.
I don't know.
And I'm like 34 minutes and Mercury is going
Oh,
into the
dude,
sun.
easily
So
that's the
in my head I'm like I
look,
like that
if you're
I
not
like
in the
ride
throne
that
room,
fence.
if you're not in the throne room, you're in the like the little antechamber, right? You're
Right.
about to go in that throne room,
How
or you
it
just got
feels is
out of
like
there.
I'm like I've got my head in the throne room and my tail is on fire. That's how it feels, you know? It's like I understand what it means to like to learn the lessons of Mercury, but I also have like that glimpse into the secret. I love Kazemi moments. Kazemi moments are that's what kind of led me here today of just like studying astrology is doing, you know, I'm an herbalist and I've done plant magic my whole life.
Wow,
Like that was my gateway to studying astrology.
that's awesome.
And so like doing auspicious magical moments, making herbal medicine
Oh yeah.
and Kazimis are were the way to do it, you know? I
Yes.
mean, like that was
Yes.
like finding that, you know, I have a still and I can make essential oils and make
That's
hydrosols at those
awesome, man.
moments
Dude, you're an alchemist. You're doing
because like
distillation is like a very advanced alchemical operation.
yeah, and so it's like, you know, my ascendant is in Mercury's bound and
Okay.
my chart ruler is
So
in
that's
Mercury's temple.
in some ways of figuring that means Mercury is your oiko despotes,
Mhm.
right?
Yep.
As the bound lord of the ascendant. So that's
Yeah.
it's almost like that's your daimon, right? That's
Yeah,
your
for
right.
sure.
Like look, as soon as you become an astrologer or an alchemist or any of the three hermetic arts, alchemy, astrology, magic, like
Mhm.
you're being Mercury. Like
Yes. Yeah.
that's it, right?
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah.
That's
And
why I feel like that book was maybe the most valuable contribution I could make, even though like in my heart I'm a Venus guy, I'm a goddess worshiper. But I mean, Ariel wrote such a fucking incredible book about that. Like, what am I gonna do that could
mm,
possibly, and so I figured like writing a book about Mercury and opening up the lens on that
mhm.
was probably the best contribution I could make because that's who we are, really.
Yeah.
We're Mercury, and so
I
yeah,
was
it's
excited to see it. I hadn't realized that you had written it. So when I saw it, I was like, all right, it's gotta
yeah,
be
I
added.
can't
Yeah.
believe it's been like 7 years ago. I'm still working on volume 2.
Yeah.
But it'll come when it comes. You
Yeah.
can't rush these things. So
No, that's that Kairos moment, you know. It's just gotta
yeah,
happen.
yeah. Thanks so
Awesome.
much for this
Yeah, this was
conversation.
fun.
It was fun. Yeah,
Thanks
totally.
for like launching us off.
You bet.
Um, and
It's an
I'll
honor.
yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
Hail Aries. Woo! Go see a sunrise.